It has just been leaked that George Russell is joining Red Bull. This move comes as Max Verstappen is closer than ever to Mercedes despite the dismissal of Christian Horner. Stay until the end and I'll tell you all about it. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. George Russell's future in Formula One, once considered stable and secure within the Mercedes-AMG Petronas structure, is now teetering on the edge of a perilous precipice, shaped not by any shortcomings on the track or deficiencies in commitment, but by an evolving vortex of internal political maneuvering, shifting allegiances, and high-stakes strategic recalculations that are unraveling behind the scenes at one of the most powerful teams in the sport. While Russell has displayed undeniable consistency, an impressive work ethic and flashes of brilliance that have made him one of the most promising talents of his generation, the unfortunate truth emerging from deep within the paddock is that his destiny may soon slip entirely out of his own control. The whispers that began as barely audible rumors have grown into a roar of speculation, and the atmosphere surrounding Mercedes is now thick with uncertainty, distrust, and intrigue. Every subtle gesture, every offhand comment, and every unscheduled meeting is being scrutinized with a level of intensity usually reserved for title-deciding Grand Prix weekends. Multiple insiders embedded within the inner circles of the Mercedes camp have begun revealing fragments of a story that is rapidly gaining momentum. Far from the glare of cameras and far removed from the sanitized quotes offered to the press, something seismic appears to be unfolding within the walls of Brackley. Senior figures with knowledge of the team's strategic direction are quietly acknowledging that discussions are taking place. Discussions so explosive they threaten to upend the very fabric of Mercedes' long-term driver philosophy. The catalyst? A covert yet increasingly undeniable set of negotiations between team boss Toto Wolff and none other than Max Verstappen, the reigning world champion and the fiercest competitor currently walking the F1 grid. These conversations, initially dismissed as baseless hearsay, have now been all but confirmed by multiple high-level sources who have spoken under strict anonymity. What was once considered implausible now seems frighteningly real. Verstappen is actively exploring a future away from Red Bull, and Mercedes is courting him with open arms. The setting of this unfolding drama could not be more symbolic: Sardinia, a secluded paradise far from the eyes of journalists and fan cameras, where Wolff and Verstappen reportedly engaged in what was far more than a casual exchange of pleasantries. According to those familiar with the matter, their meeting was not a courtesy call or a social catch-up, but a deliberate, focused, and extended dialogue about the potential of a future collaboration. The topics discussed reportedly spanned everything from technical vision to contractual flexibility, from Mercedes' renewed push for dominance in the upcoming regulation era to the psychological challenge of dethroning Red Bull with its own weapon. For Russell, the mere fact that these discussions took place, regardless of whether a deal is finalized or not, is nothing short of devastating. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. The implications are vast and deeply unsettling. In the ruthlessly competitive world of Formula One, perception often precedes reality, and once a driver's place within a team is seen as vulnerable, that perception spreads like wildfire, influencing internal dynamics, media narratives, and even on-track relationships. For George Russell, who has fought tooth and nail to establish himself as a pillar of Mercedes' future, who stepped into Lewis Hamilton's shadow and earned his stripes through hard-fought duels, strategic masterstrokes, and a stoic professionalism that belied his age, the ground is now beginning to shift beneath his feet. The sense of betrayal is palpable among those close to him, as it appears loyalty and performance may not be enough when the allure of securing the sport's most dominant force becomes an option too tempting to resist. Even more disturbing is the silence surrounding these developments. Mercedes has issued no statements, no denials, no attempts to shield Russell from the rising speculation. Toto Wolff, known for his shrewd diplomacy and tactical ambiguity, has remained deliberately vague when questioned. His lack of vocal support for Russell in recent interviews has not gone unnoticed. Some see it as a strategic decision to maintain leverage in talks with Verstappen. Others interpret it as a signal that Russell's time as the team's centerpiece may already be over in all but name. Within the factory, morale is reportedly split. Engineers who have built close relationships with Russell are said to be frustrated, even demoralized, as whispers of a Verstappen-led revolution gain credibility. From Russell's perspective, the situation presents an impossible conundrum. Stay silent and risk being sidelined? Speak up and risk fracturing the team from within? As a driver who has been praised for his calm demeanor and emotional intelligence, he now faces perhaps the most psychologically taxing moment of his career. Should he explore exit routes? Should he demand assurances? Should he play political chess against a master like Wolff? There are no easy answers, only increasing tension and dwindling time. The paddock has already begun to speculate on potential outcomes. If Mercedes does indeed succeed in prying Verstappen away from Red Bull, Russell may find himself with no choice but to seek refuge elsewhere. But where? The grid is already saturated with long-term contracts and carefully balanced partnerships. Ferrari has committed to Hamilton and Leclerc. McLaren has doubled down on Norris and Piastri. Aston Martin revolves around Alonso's experience, and Stroll's seat is untouchable. Audi is still forming its identity. Williams, his former team, lacks competitiveness. The brutal truth is that Russell could be facing not just displacement, but temporary career stagnation, unless a wild-card opportunity presents itself at the last moment. Yet amid the darkness, some see a potential for rebirth. If Russell is pushed out, it could spark a fierce resurgence in his hunger to prove himself. Freed from the constraints of team politics and unspoken hierarchies, he might reinvent his path, just as others before him have done. Legends in this sport have endured betrayal, politics, and upheaval, only to come back stronger, meaner, more determined than ever. Russell is young, talented, and mentally tough. If Mercedes chooses to look elsewhere, it may come to regret not building around him as the next generation's standard-bearer. As the drama continues to unfold in real time, every race, every qualifying session, every team radio message will be viewed through a different lens. Is Russell still part of the long-term vision? Or is he simply holding the wheel until the next superstar is ready to take over? In this merciless environment, where careers are shaped as much by whispers in boardrooms as by lap times on Sunday afternoons, George Russell now finds himself in a position no driver envies. Brilliant on track, but a pawn in a much larger, colder, and more calculated game. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. As if the chaos surrounding Red Bull wasn't already volatile enough, the situation took on an even more precarious edge with the revelation of a contractual loophole that could send shockwaves through the paddock. Max Verstappen, Red Bull's most prized asset and the cornerstone of their recent era of dominance, is rumored to possess a highly specific clause embedded within his current agreement, an exit mechanism tied directly to the team's performance in the World Championship standings. This is not a standard buyout clause or a vague mutual termination option. It's a calculated escape hatch designed to give Verstappen absolute leverage. If Red Bull, amid their spiraling internal disintegration, fails to remain in championship contention, Max has the contractual green light to walk away from the team without any penalty. No lawsuits, no ugly boardroom battles. Just a clean departure for one of the sport's most valuable and influential drivers. And now, with the team engulfed in an unprecedented leadership implosion, that possibility is no longer theoretical. It's knocking loudly at the door of reality. The atmosphere inside Red Bull Racing has morphed from one of quiet confidence to outright turbulence. The once rock-solid foundation is now riddled with cracks, as some of the most pivotal figures behind the curtain have either chosen to leave or been unceremoniously removed. Adrian Newey, the engineering genius widely credited with the aerodynamic brilliance behind Red Bull's most dominant machines, has already begun charting his exit. Jonathan Wheatley, the sporting director and key operational mind, has departed under murky circumstances. And then there's the dramatic and abrupt ousting of Christian Horner, the man who helped mold the team into a juggernaut and navigated it through the most competitive and controversial periods in recent F1 history. This wasn't just a few backroom changes. This was a mass exodus of leadership, a disintegration of experience, structure, and strategic continuity. The Red Bull that Max Verstappen signed with no longer exists in spirit, vision, or command. It has been hollowed out from the top down. And with the power vacuum widening, Verstappen's departure feels less like a negotiation point and more like a ticking time bomb. Inside the garages, the corridors, the motorhomes, the mood has shifted. Mechanics who once thrived under a clear chain of command now operate under whispers and uncertainty. Engineers, previously empowered by a cohesive vision, now scramble to make sense of the ever-changing leadership dynamics. Verstappen, who has long enjoyed de facto control over development priorities and strategic calls, suddenly finds himself surrounded by instability, questions, and a growing realization that his winning window may be closing faster than anticipated. His trust in the infrastructure has been eroded. His faith in the system is wearing thin. And that one contractual escape route, a clause likely buried pages deep in legal jargon, now stands as the most powerful weapon he possesses. Meanwhile, as Red Bull teeters on the edge of an identity crisis, the paddock is already eyeing the potential aftershocks. And that's where George Russell's name enters the frame, not as an innocent bystander, but as a central figure in a potential seismic shift. Russell, since his arrival at Mercedes, has been everything the team hoped he would be and more. Methodical in his approach, razor-sharp under pressure, and frighteningly fast when it counts, he's carried himself with the calm confidence of a future world champion. From the moment the new ground effect regulations reshaped the pecking order, Russell emerged not just as a rising talent, but as the statistical backbone of the Mercedes resurgence. Of the 6 victories the Silver Arrows have managed to scrape together in this new era, 4 belong to George. Out of the 7 pole positions the team has secured since 2022, Russell has been responsible for 6. Those aren't just solid numbers, they're game-changing. He hasn't just contributed to Mercedes' comeback narrative, he's authored most of it. And yet, for all that he has achieved, for all the metrics that validate his elite status, Russell now finds himself on shaky ground. Not because he's underperforming, not because he's made costly mistakes, but simply because the specter of Verstappen looms so large. Should Max activate his exit clause and Red Bull's walls continue to crumble, the most likely landing spot for the Dutch champion is Mercedes, a team hungry to reclaim its throne, desperate to fill the vacuum left by Lewis Hamilton's departure, and fully aware of the commercial and competitive tsunami Verstappen would bring with him. In such a scenario, George Russell becomes the collateral damage, the expendable piece. The driver who, despite his consistency, speed, and commitment, may find himself pushed aside in favor of a megastar whose brand power eclipses nearly everyone else in the sport. Russell's predicament is cruelly ironic. He has delivered when it mattered. He has out-qualified his teammates more often than not. He has adapted to wildly inconsistent machinery with professionalism and patience. And yet, in a sport where politics and perception often trump pure performance, he may be deemed surplus to requirements if the Verstappen sweepstakes become reality. Behind closed doors, team bosses are already running the simulations, both on track and on spreadsheets. Verstappen in a Mercedes would bring massive sponsorship traction, unprecedented media attention, and potentially an instant return to championship relevance. The temptation is overwhelming, and Russell, through no fault of his own, might be left holding the short end of a stick carved by forces far beyond his control. This is Formula One at its rawest, a brutal ballet of power, talent, and timing. Verstappen holds the trigger. Red Bull is unraveling. Mercedes is watching. And George Russell, one of the sport's most complete drivers, may soon find himself racing not just for points, but for survival in a game where loyalty is a myth and success is only as secure as your last contract negotiation. The truth, stripped of all the polite press statements and corporate diplomacy, is that George Russell's entire Formula One existence is not just influenced by Mercedes, it is fundamentally owned by them. This is not merely about which car he drives or which engineer leads his race weekend setup. It's about how every meaningful decision in his professional life has, for years, been filtered through the lens of what Mercedes believes is best for their brand, their future, and their dynasty. Russell's career trajectory, his ascension through the junior categories, his placement at Williams, his carefully orchestrated promotion to the works team, was never just about merit or timing. It was about control. From the very beginning, Mercedes was not just a guiding hand in his development. They were the architect and the gatekeeper. And now, as rumors intensify and whispers grow louder in the paddock, the uncomfortable reality is beginning to surface. If Mercedes makes the earth-shaking move to bring in Max Verstappen, should he ever decide to walk away from the political minefield that is Red Bull racing, it won't just be about swapping one driver for another. It won't simply be a reallocation of seats on a chessboard. For George Russell, it would be the collapse of the entire platform upon which his Formula One journey has been built. He wouldn't just lose a spot on the grid, he would lose the carefully cultivated sense of permanence and belonging that every top-tier driver needs to feel in order to operate at the limit. And the writing, whether anyone dares to read it aloud, is already etched into the walls of Brackley. Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the teenage sensation, the phenom that Toto Wolff cannot stop praising, the Italian prodigy around whom Mercedes is quietly constructing its next chapter, has a deal in place for 2026. Not a rumor. Not a possibility. A signed, sealed contract. Meanwhile, George Russell does not. The silence surrounding his long-term future isn't just awkward, it's deafening. It's not the result of oversight. It's not a clerical delay. It's the result of calculated timing. It's Mercedes deliberately keeping their options open while projecting an image of stability to the public. For a driver like Russell, who has been fiercely loyal, always respectful, and ever the corporate soldier, the absence of a contract past next season is more than a contractual gap. It's a signal. A quiet strategic message sent from the highest levels of the organization, suggesting that he may not be the centerpiece of their vision after all. And that realization, that creeping doubt, is impossible to ignore, no matter how composed he appears on camera. Because that's where it gets even more fascinating: Russell himself. The man at the center of the storm, the driver whose name is now sandwiched between Verstappen's and Antonelli's in countless speculative pieces, continues to project an aura of calm professionalism. His words to the press are smooth, measured, perfectly engineered. Every team has 2 seats. It's logical for every organization to think about what lies ahead. I've always been open, I'm ready to be teammates with anyone. A flawless quote. A diplomat's answer. But the subtext tells a different story. Behind those rehearsed words, there's a man doing mental gymnastics. A competitor who must now navigate the thin line between being a team player and being an expendable asset. He's smart enough to understand how Formula One works. He knows that even in the best-run teams, allegiances can shift, and promises can fade into ambiguity when a generational talent like Verstappen becomes available. He also knows that Antonelli isn't just another junior with a bit of hype. He's being treated like the heir to the throne. Every resource, every media campaign, every word out of Toto Wolff's mouth suggests that Mercedes is preparing the stage for a new era, one in which Russell might not be the lead actor anymore. And yet, he smiles. He signs autographs. He shows up to every event with the same posture, the same gratitude, the same humility. But that smile has to mask 1,000 questions. Questions like, what happens if Verstappen walks through that door tomorrow? What if Mercedes decides they want both Antonelli and Max under the same roof by 2026? What if the story Russell has believed in, that he is the long-term future of Mercedes, is actually just a chapter, not the whole book? Because in this sport, timing is everything. And while Russell has played the long game, bided his time, waited for Hamilton to step aside, and believed in the process, it now seems that the ground beneath his feet is beginning to shift. Mercedes, for all its sophistication and loyalty talk, is still in the business of winning. And if that means replacing a solid, reliable driver with a global superstar or a teenage phenomenon, history tells us they won't hesitate. Russell's situation is a masterclass in Formula One politics, a quiet power struggle playing out in boardrooms, media soundbites, and contract negotiation tables. His calm demeanor might convince some that everything is under control, but the reality is far more complex. He's balancing on a knife's edge, holding onto a dream that might already be slipping through his fingers, all while pretending the storm around him is just another race weekend. But those who watch closely, who know how to read between the lines, understand what's really happening. George Russell is fighting for more than just a seat. He's fighting for relevance, for legacy, and for the right to not be remembered as the driver who was merely keeping the car warm until something shinier came along. As whispers grow louder that Red Bull may be preparing to sever ties with Max Verstappen, a move that, just months ago, would have seemed unthinkable, the spotlight has now swung dramatically toward George Russell, who suddenly finds himself at the epicenter of the most high-stakes transfer speculation Formula One has seen in years. Red Bull, a team synonymous with relentless aggression and unshakable dominance, is no longer the stable monolith it once was. The departure of Christian Horner has fractured its internal structure, fractured its vision, fractured its legacy, and fractured its identity. In the void left behind, the Austrian powerhouse is scrambling not just for a driver, but for a symbol, a driver who represents a new chapter, a clean break, a restoration of control after months of chaos. Internally, Red Bull is undergoing an identity crisis. The departure of Horner, coupled with Verstappen's strained relationship with upper management, has left the team adrift. Gone is the clear chain of command that once drove their domination. Now, in this new era of political uncertainty, they find themselves looking outward, beyond their traditional driver academy, for answers. Laurent Mekies, now overseeing the long-term strategic evolution of the Red Bull Group following his exit from Racing Bulls, is said to be leading internal discussions that veer far from the Red Bull of old. Mekies, with his sharp analytical mind and reputation for future-focused thinking, has reportedly voiced interest in accelerating the promotions of junior talents like Arvid Lindblad and Isaac Hadjar, two young, blisteringly fast drivers who are rapidly climbing through the ranks. But as promising as they are, the question that haunts every meeting, every email, every private conversation, is simple and brutal. Can a pair of untested teenagers be trusted to carry the weight of a broken empire in what might be the most brutally competitive age Formula One has ever known? And that's exactly where George Russell becomes more than just an option. He becomes the answer. He becomes the vision. He becomes the reset button. Russell, despite his age, brings a rare and crucial combination of experience and hunger. He's not green, but he's not jaded. He has tasted both defeat and triumph. He's suffered in backmarker machinery, excelled in high-pressure environments, and proven time and again that he's not just fast but surgical. He doesn't merely pilot a car around a circuit, he dissects every corner, pushes through every limit, and delivers consistency, maturity, and sharp racecraft under fire. And that's precisely what Red Bull needs. Not a wild card, not a marketing play, but a battle-tested racer who knows what it takes to win and what it feels like to lead. With Red Bull preparing to launch its revolutionary in-house power units under the Ford badge starting in 2026, the stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't a mere engine change, it's a seismic shift in philosophy. No longer relying on external suppliers, Red Bull will be fully responsible for the heartbeat of its own performance. They need someone who won't flinch when things go wrong. Someone who can guide development with real-time feedback. Someone who will challenge engineers without alienating them. Someone who can walk into the simulator and command respect from the first lap. And Russell fits that profile like a custom race glove. But Red Bull isn't alone in eyeing the Briton. Quietly, methodically, and with almost surgical precision, Aston Martin has crept into the background of this rumor storm. While the spotlight dances over Red Bull's public power struggle, Aston Martin has been working in the shadows, ready to pounce. Fernando Alonso, one of the most iconic names in the sport, is reportedly preparing to shift into a semi-ceremonial role, trading in his racing boots for the long-term vision of becoming a brand ambassador and strategic advisor. Meanwhile, Lance Stroll continues under a precarious year-to-year renewal structure, a setup that gives the team maximum flexibility should the right opportunity present itself. And with Russell potentially becoming that opportunity, everything may soon click into place. A key element fueling the Russell to Aston speculation lies in a familiar name, Andy Cowell. Once the mastermind behind Mercedes' dominant hybrid engines, Cowell now leads Aston Martin's ambitious technical overhaul. He and Russell worked closely during their shared time at Mercedes, cultivating a strong professional bond rooted in mutual respect and performance-driven dialogue. That history matters. That synergy matters. Because when a driver and technical director understand each other on a granular level, magic happens. And in Formula One, where fractions of a second mean everything, relationships like that can be the difference between winning and becoming a footnote. Lawrence Stroll, never one to shy away from bold moves, is reportedly fixated on the idea of reshaping Aston Martin's competitive image around a central pillar, a driver who embodies long-term potential and near-term results. He doesn't just want a face for the brand. He wants a backbone. Someone who can endure. Someone who can inspire. And Russell, with his blend of charisma, composure, and elite skill, has become that ideal candidate. The plan, insiders suggest, is to pair Russell with a new Honda engine package, bolstered by the potential addition of design legend Adrian Newey, whose flirtation with Aston Martin has set tongues wagging across the sport. The pieces are there. The ambitions are real. And all that's missing is the anchor, an anchor named George. In the chess game of driver movement, Russell has become the queen, versatile, powerful, and central to every meaningful strategy on the grid. Whether he ends up at a Red Bull team desperate to erase its recent scars or becomes the foundational stone of Aston Martin's resurrection, one thing is clear: this isn't just about contracts or rumors. This is about legacy. This is about leverage. And as the sport prepares to pivot into a new engine era, the question isn't whether George Russell will become a central figure in the next chapter of Formula One, it's where he'll choose to build his kingdom. George Russell's potential move to Aston Martin is wrapped in layers of complexity, political minefields, and entrenched favoritism that make the transition anything but straightforward. On the surface, it may appear like a natural fit, one of the grid's most talented and composed drivers joining a team desperate to break into the elite tier of championship contenders. But beneath that assumption lies a dense web of challenges, power dynamics, and personal allegiances that make this one of the most delicate negotiations in the paddock. The first and most immovable obstacle? Lance Stroll. The Canadian driver, who holds his seat not just through performance but through lineage and executive backing, remains an immovable pillar within the organization. Regardless of on-track results, his place within the team has long been safeguarded by the influence of his father, Lawrence Stroll, the very man bankrolling the Aston Martin project. For Russell to slide into a green race suit, it wouldn't simply require a team reshuffle. It would demand a corporate earthquake. A seismic shift behind boardroom doors. A unified uprising from within the team's leadership, shareholders, and perhaps even the manufacturer's global partners, all needing to align and apply enough pressure to make the impossible possible. In a world where contracts can be rewritten, and legal frameworks bent, even nepotism can be challenged, but it requires more than talent. It demands leverage Russell may soon possess. Complicating the matter further is Fernando Alonso's binding agreement with Aston Martin that extends through the end of 2026. A contract as ironclad as any on the grid, with a driver who has proven, at 43 years of age, that he's lost none of his edge, none of his fire, and none of his surgical racercraft. However, Alonso isn't oblivious to the winds of change. The two-time world champion is a veteran of the sport's ruthless political undercurrent. He knows what it means to fight for your place, and what it means to step aside when the time is right. Privately, he has already acknowledged that if a driver of Russell's caliber becomes a free agent, you make way. Not because of sentiment. Not out of fairness. But because Formula One doesn't care about history or legacy, it only bows to results. There is no mercy. No loyalty. Only performance. Meanwhile, in the background, a far more subtle yet equally intense battle is unfolding. Aston Martin and Red Bull are locked in a silent tug-of-war over Russell's future, each side leveraging their appeal, their ambitions, and their projections of success. Red Bull sees him as a long-term weapon, a calculated, level-headed successor in case Verstappen chooses to walk away. Aston Martin views him as a missing piece in their puzzle, the steady hand that can deliver podiums and championships once the 2026 engine changes reset the playing field. Both teams want him. Both are watching Mercedes. And Mercedes, infuriatingly, is saying nothing. The silence from Brackley is no longer just strategic, it feels personal. George Russell has not been offered a contract extension. He hasn't received a public vote of confidence. He hasn't even been shielded from swirling rumors about Max Verstappen joining Mercedes. Instead, he's been left to twist in the wind, performing at the highest level with no assurance, no guarantees, and no clarity on whether the team he pledged his future to is willing to do the same in return. For Russell, this is more than just a professional uncertainty. It's an emotional sting. This is a driver who gave everything for the Mercedes brand. A man who endured 3 years of driving midfield machinery at Williams with grace, discipline, and resilience. He never complained. He never broke under pressure. He bided his time with dignity, believing, that his reward would come. In 2020, when Lewis Hamilton tested positive for COVID-19, Russell stepped into the world champion's car and nearly won the race in Sakir, only for a tragic pit stop blunder to snatch away what should have been a career-defining moment. He didn't lash out. He didn't point fingers. He simply got back to work. Then came the 2022 season, the first under the new regulations. Many expected Russell to be obliterated by Hamilton. Instead, he matched him, challenged him, beat him in the standings. He didn't just survive against a 7-time world champion, he stood his ground. He showed intelligence, consistency, and maturity far beyond his years. Every quality Mercedes claims to value. Every attribute they say they look for in a driver. And now? Now he's being ignored. Now he's being left in limbo, while his name gets tossed around in the same conversations that flirt with Max Verstappen wearing silver overalls. For George Russell, it's the most bitter twist of all. The boy who waited patiently at the back of the grid. The man who proved himself under fire. The teammate who never played politics. The driver who trusted the system. And yet, the system has rewarded his loyalty with silence. His consistency with doubt. His potential with neglect. And still, he keeps delivering. Lap after lap. Weekend after weekend. Whether it's rain in Spa, heat in Bahrain, or chaos in Monaco, Russell continues to show why he belongs at the front of the grid. But even the strongest resolve can wear thin. Even the most patient warrior has a breaking point. If Mercedes won't show faith, others will. If they won't commit, there are teams waiting, watching, willing to build around him. So now, the countdown begins. Not to a race start, but to a reckoning. Russell's future is a ticking time bomb. And when it explodes, it won't just reshape his career, it could redefine the power structure of Formula One itself. Because this isn't just about one driver. It's about the choices teams make. About the values they stand by. About whether talent is rewarded or forgotten. George Russell has earned his place among the elite. The only question is, who will finally recognize it before it's too late? George Russell finds himself caught in a relentless, high-stakes paradox that feels almost impossible to escape. Every race, every qualifying lap, every press conference, and every whisper in the garage adds to the weight he carries on his shoulders. He's fully aware that even if he rediscovers his best form and begins delivering podiums consistently, perhaps even a win or two, there's no guarantee it will secure his future. In fact, ironically, it might accelerate his downfall. Imagine the cruel irony. Russell fights tooth and nail, pulls Mercedes back into contention, even eclipses the highly touted Kimi Antonelli on sheer pace and results, and yet still finds himself pushed out. Not for lack of performance, but because he did too much. Because his excellence might activate the very clause that allows Max Verstappen to walk into Mercedes, leaving George, once again, on the outside looking in. It's an emotional trap disguised as opportunity. If he underdelivers, he's disposable. If he overdelivers, he becomes a casualty of the very success he's engineered. The outcome is heartbreakingly consistent. He loses, no matter the route. But make no mistake, George Russell is not naive, nor is he someone who will sit idly while others chart his path. He's long past the point of waiting quietly in the shadows, hoping Toto Wolff will hand him a definitive answer. That silence, that ambiguity, is a message in itself. And Russell hears it loud and clear. He knows that in this brutal, fast-moving sport, those who wait too long are often left behind. He understands that agency, real agency, doesn't come from being loyal to uncertainty, but from seizing control when the stakes are highest. And right now, that means exploring every possible door, no matter how wild, how unexpected, or how controversial it may seem on paper. Aston Martin looms as a tantalizing alternative, especially with Lawrence Stroll's empire craving legitimacy and capable leadership. Fernando Alonso won't race forever, and the team needs a driver who can carry both technical feedback and raw speed into the next chapter. Russell could be that driver, someone who brings pedigree, youth, and experience without the baggage of a fading legend. And then there's Red Bull, a name still burning with ambition but now shaken to its core, reeling from political infighting, leadership fractures, and the looming threat of Verstappen's potential departure. What if Russell could become the man who not only replaces Max, but rebuilds Red Bull's shattered culture? Imagine the narrative. The boy who waited too long at Mercedes becomes the phoenix of Milton Keynes, rising from the chaos and establishing a new era of dominance. And if neither of those giants call to him, there's still Audi, a brand that's pouring everything into its Formula One debut, determined to make a statement the moment the 2026 regulations arrive. They need a flagship driver, someone credible, someone hungry, someone who's been bruised by the system but hasn't lost the fire. Russell fits that bill to perfection. Alpine, though further adrift, still holds potential as a sleeping powerhouse, especially if new leadership injects fresh ambition. The world outside Mercedes isn't a wasteland, it's a minefield of untapped possibilities, and George has to start navigating it now, before someone else claims the future that could have been his. Formula One is rapidly approaching a tectonic shift. The 2026 regulation overhaul is not just a technical reset, it's a generational pivot, a moment that will redefine which teams dominate the next decade. Every organization, every engineer, every strategist is already planning with the precision of a grandmaster, calculating 3, 4, even 5 moves ahead. And George Russell, if he wants to survive, and not just survive but thrive, must realize he's not a passive piece on this board. He's not a rook trapped in a corner, nor a pawn waiting to be sacrificed. He's a knight, mobile, intelligent, adaptable, and capable of disrupting the very fabric of the game if he chooses the right moment to strike. And what if Mercedes really is willing to trade him for the gravitational pull of Verstappen? What if they're willing to throw away the driver who's endured their worst seasons, given them hope during collapse, and managed to stay composed, loyal, and focused through years of instability and second-guessing? If they turn their back on him now, they may not just be losing a solid number 2, they might be sacrificing the one person in their garage who has both the skill and the strength of character to carry the silver arrows into the future. And if they gamble wrong, if Verstappen's presence fractures rather than fortifies their team, they may never recover from what they let slip through their fingers. So now the question is bigger than just one contract, one team, or even one season. It's a question of identity, of trajectory, of legacy. Should George Russell take the leap and put his faith in something, anything, other than the fading promise of Mercedes' long-term vision? Should he bet on his own value and dare to reshape the power structure of Formula One from the outside? Could he become the unexpected cornerstone of Red Bull's next chapter? Or will he instead resurrect Aston Martin's dreams and build something legendary where no one thought to look? The time for waiting is over. The time for decisive action is now. So what would you do in George Russell's place? Is the smart move to stay and fight for his position in a Mercedes system that may already have one foot out the door on him? Or is this the perfect moment to gamble everything? To walk away from familiarity and trust that greatness doesn't always come with a silver badge? Could we be witnessing the early whispers of a seismic transfer, one that might turn the entire competitive order upside down in just a few short months? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you're not ready for this F1 drama to end, click the video on your screen now. We're diving even deeper into how George Russell could become the most disruptive force in the Formula One paddock before the next flag drops.